Hello, welcome to episode 84 of the Online Tennis Podcast. I'm joined by Vansh. How are we doing, Vansh?
Doing awesome, Jack. Always excited when you invite me onto your show.
Good to hear it. Today, Vansh, we've got three topics lined up in particular from the last couple of weeks. First one we're going to look at is Daniil Medvedev back. He won in Rotterdam this week. There's still maybe some question marks overhead. There's maybe some question marks that have been answered. We'll talk about all that in a bit. Belinda Bencic won in Abu Dhabi. She was on fire. A little bit on Tursunov and the changes he's made to her game, basically, and is this sustainable for the rest of the year? How much of a threat is she? And a little bit on Yibing Wu, who won in Dallas, first Chinese ATP titleist in history. Very, very interesting story there. Just a little bit on his background. And that's about it. We'll touch a little bit on Swiatek and her title, of course, and a little bit on a few other things. But those will be the three main topics, Vansh, if you're happy to dive straight into Daniil Medvedev.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, Daniil Medvedev. Obviously, we know sort of what the storyline for him is. Coming into this week, he was outside the top 10. He'd obviously taken a loss to Sebastian Korda in the third round of the Australian Open. But I feel like these conditions in Rotterdam suit his game really, really nicely.
Mm-hmm.
He tends to really. I mean, this was his eighth title indoors. He's won 16 overall. He likes these low bouncing, slow type of indoor courts where he can really, push players into an exhaustion type mode and baseline exchanges. And he still gets enough out of his serve. He's still able to hang behind the baseline and work his way on top and actually do some dictating when the opponent is least expecting it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen him have success already at the back end of last year in Vienna. And I think his run this week in Rotterdam, albeit I think he was playing at a higher level,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I think it's a similar type of thing for me. I need to see it at a Masters 1000 or a major, but full credit to him. He came back from a set down today. His tactics were very good today against Jannik Sinner,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's a positive for him. He's now 5-0 against Felix Auger-Aliassime, 5-0 against Jannik Sinner, and he's back in the top eight. And now, pretty much any points he can gain, pretty much from Indian Wells and Miami, all the way until the North American hardcourt swing. No, I think overall this was a much needed great week for Medvedev. So
Yeah.
he and his fans can be pretty happy, I think.
Yeah, you touched on a few things that I'll flesh out a little bit in a bit. I'm going to segue a little bit into Sinner, obviously. Just first things first, got to note that Sinner is playing great tennis. That was a great person to beat in the final. I mean, Medvedev beat
Yeah,
Sinner during his run in Vienna as well, but I'd argue Sinner's even stepped up since then. I think you said it on Twitter. Obviously, he's now made all four Grand Slam quarterfinals, right, since last year, having made the
hmm
US Open. For reference, I mean, you've only got three other people in the top 50 besides the obvious two, Djokovic and Nadal, that have made
hmm
three Grand Slam quarterfinals: Berrettini, Cilic, and Kachanov. I mean, that's a
yeah,
esteemed company, obviously, and Sinner's done it before them by miles. So he's one of the best all-court players in the game. One of the best all-court up-and-comers, and obviously had won in Montpellier the week before. Maxime Cressy hadn't had a serve broken up until the final, and then obviously Sinner goes into that final, shows you how it's done on return. Beat Arthur
yeah,
Fee along the way as well, by the way. His forehand is terrifying stuff. He'll be obviously a lovely threat for years to come. We'll see how much of his game turns into patience and sort of point construction like Alcaraz. There's maybe too much heat on that forehand in a way, but you said it yourself. If you beat Roberto Bautista Agut, 3-4 and an indoor hard court like that, then you merit getting some attention there for sure. This guy's obviously going to be somewhere within the top
yeah,
50 at some point, right? So very, very exciting stuff for the French. Anyway, back to Sinner. Sinner went into this week again, beat Tsitsipas for the second time in his career. That's 7 meetings, and only the second time Sinner's managed to get the win there, which in a few ways is kind of surprising, actually. I definitely thought it would be a closer head-to-head than that, but really great stuff from Jannik Sinner. And then in the final against Medvedev, and this is what I want to touch on, the punchline, you kind of touched it on already, Vanch. These conditions suit
yeah,
Medvedev to a T. So Astana last year, indoors, still playing great tennis there when the courts are a little bit slower to sort of medium. Same in Vienna as well. He won in Vienna, got to the semis of Astana and had to retire there after playing an absolute blinder against Djokovic, one set apiece, one of the best matches of the year, even though it was abridged. He still plays really well indoors in slower conditions because he can lock anybody, bar about two or three players, into that backhand cross sort of dynamic and win every time. And even Sinner, whose backhand is massive, obviously, he's got some of the most spin on the shot in the game, but even against Sinner, it makes it look like a sort of second-rate shot. And sure enough, the unforced errors started to spray as Medvedev found his feet in the second and third sets. 60 of the rallies apparently went over 9 shots. I'm sure you heard that stat, Vanch, and over a third of the total points were those extended rallies. You look at Medvedev's tournament in the ATP finals at the end of the year, where the courts were way faster and it was all serve dominated. Arguably, for me, Medvedev's worst shot over the last year has been his serve, and that's maybe where some of the flakiness has started to show. So on faster courts against top 10 players, he kind of got found out. And I would argue on faster courts going on throughout the year, the same thing could happen against a top 10 player. Against Felix on a slow court, I think Medvedev's matchup, is very favourable. But as soon as he gets into a sort of faster court like Australia, if he'd had to play a top 10 player there, obviously Korda played top 10 tennis, arguably, but if he'd had to play a top 10 player there, who knows what would have happened, Vanch. And my point is, great win this week, but I don't know if it actually says that much about what we're going to see from Medvedev this year. Yes, I agree, his level has raised a little bit, but I don't think it's anything like, he's going to go on and win the US Open or anything like that. Like, there's no way to say at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good assessment overall. Definitely you saw how hard Sinner had to work to win that first set. Won those lengthy rallies over 9 shots. I think it was 18-14 in favor of Jannik Sinner, and you just see how much physical and emotional energy he had to expend to basically outduel Medvedev from the back of the court and in those long skirmishes. And then after that, it just kind of took its toll. And maybe it was that the fact that this was his 8th match in 9 days. And maybe it was the fact that Medvedev actually played sneaky aggressive in the beginning of the first set to get the break, and then he's still able to just go into that lockdown mode from behind the baseline, and you feel trapped because even though Jannik Sinner is the cleanest ball striker off both wings, one of them, especially top 2 or 3 on the tour, he still just has to find out more ways, because obviously he was struggling physically in this match, and he didn't have quite enough other things in his arsenal, I think, to maybe potentially counteract that. And he's definitely improved in that department with Darren Cahill. But I think after those last 2 sets, they're going to go back to the drawing board and figure out, okay, how can we mix this up a little bit more? Maybe come to the net a little bit earlier in some of these exchanges, because I think actually Sinner is a decent volleyer. He just doesn't, maybe trust himself enough to do it in some big moments. In the first set, he was 10 for 15 at the net. And I think that was big on some occasions. He recognized when to move forward. He was very patient with his shot selection and kind of figured out, okay, now I can go down the line, and now I can sort of close the gap here and use the backhand volley nicely. And he brought Medvedev forward a couple of times with a drop shot. I think that could be used a little bit more, but it's tricky to do in these slow conditions.
I was going to say Djokovic is about the only guy who's made it look easy on a slow indoor hard court against Medvedev ever, maybe, actually, serving and volleying and coming into the net in general. It's a very, very rare talent that can make that happen, and Sinner's not quite there yet. And that's not a slight on him, really. It's just you have to be a great volleyer to play that sort of play against Medvedev. Hi, I just wanted to say thank you very much for watching the video. It would help a lot if you were to click the subscribe button. Only 3% of my viewers at the moment are subscribed, so please, it would help support the channel a lot. Thank you very much. I'd like to move on to Belinda Bencic, who won in Abu Dhabi a week ago. This, for me, is one of the most interesting, one of the 3 most interesting stories of the last 2 weeks, because Bencic is on a roll at the moment, 14-2 on the season. Those 2 losses coming to Sabalenka and Swiatek, arguably the 2 best players on the tour at the moment. How has she made herself so terrifying recently? This was also off the back of last year, I would say. I don't think this is just exclusive to this year. She started playing this well just at the tail end of the season. And it was probably off the back of the input of Dmitry Tursunov, obviously. Former coach of Kontaveit and Sabalenka, took the 2 of them to top 5 in the world. And it looks like he could do the same for Bencic for sure. He spoke at length on Craig Shapiro's podcast about the improvements he's made to her game. And it's super interesting to see it translated to some of the matches, specifically her match against Ludmila Samsonova in Abu Dhabi in the final, right? Because Bencic was love 3 against Samsonova. She faced 3 championship points in that final match, saved all of them, went on to win. What Tursunov said on Craig Shapiro's podcast, which I found really, really interesting. The improvements, the actual things they've been working on, recognizing whether or not she's in offense or defense and playing defensively when she's in that sort of situation. Tursunov basically saying that Bencic is great on offense, obviously hugs the baseline, able to take the ball on the rise, get the ball back to the other player's baseline super quickly, she wasn't so good at reading the situation and responding to, or respecting, I guess, the other player's shots and recognizing that she was in defense. She was trying to hit the ball back harder, apparently. Tursunov compared her to Martina Hingis, obviously a former sort of somebody that Bencic would have looked up to, right? And she plays quite similar to Hingis. She plays quite similar to Federer as well, right? In the way that she hugs the baseline, I guess, like that. And she wants to hit the ball back harder than the person who's hitting it. And Martina struggled with that as well. She, when there's a cannonball coming at her, Tursunov said she would try to deflect it like a cannonball straight back, when you have to respect the other player's shot, basically. He said there's still physics involved. You can't go up to warp speed and hope that the ball goes in. Reading situations a bit better, understanding what to do out of those situations, right? So Bencic in this final against Samsonova, in that tiebreak in the second set, she's facing 3 championship points. Bencic does such a great job when she's on defense of getting the ball back deep down the middle of the court. Now, that's the important thing, because Bencic used to try and find angles and backhands down the line when somebody absolutely slammed the ball at her. And now she's willing to be a bit more patient, take it down the middle of the court. The stats from Tennis Abstract: Bencic plays Samsonova in the Billie Jean King Cup in 2021, right? She plays her here, and they play exactly the same number of points, 188 points, okay? In the Billie Jean King Cup match, Samsonova hits 23 forehand winners and 7 backhand winners. In Abu Dhabi, she hits exactly the same number of forehand winners and exactly the same number of backhand winners. Where was the difference? It's very interesting and super coincidental, and I almost cried with just how amazing the stat was. Where was the difference? Forehand forced errors and backhand forced errors. You can imagine why, Vansh. There'd be more forced errors from Samsonova in the Billie Jean King Cup match if Bencic was trying to hit a winning shot from a losing position, right? So now, not as many forced errors, willing to let the rally go on a little bit longer, just keep it deep, try not to just blast it into the open space, basically. We saw that in Tennis Abstract. Apparently 31% of the shots down the middle at the Billie Jean King Cup, 44% in Abu Dhabi. Basically, the changes that Tursunov made, in short, Vanch, have had a very direct effect on this tournament, to the point where she basically won the title because of it. So I just thought it was absolutely fascinating and really interesting to see her turn around that sort of matchup against Samsonova with specific, coaching points from Dmitry Tursunov.
That is so fascinating to me, Jack, because obviously when you see the coach's impact directly in a match situation like that, facing 3 championship points, and I just felt like we're seeing a lot more adaptability from Bencic and a lot more mental resilience in these situations where in the past she might, like you said, she might have pulled the trigger on a shot that would have been irresponsible to do from a shot selection standpoint, and now she's willing to just sometimes, how they say in tennis, right, down the middle solves the riddle. How people always talk about going from defense to offense. Sometimes you have to take a step back and actually go from offense to defense and recognize that, okay, now I can play with a little bit more spin, a little bit more safety, and go down the middle and wait for a better ball to do something on. And particularly Samsonova as well. She has a great forehand, and she's very sort of methodical with how she constructs points with it. But oftentimes she can get a little too trigger happy, pull the trigger a little too early sometimes. And if you test that shot selection, and make her hit several more, that's the best way to do it, particularly when you're nervous and you're serving out for, serving out of WTA 500 title like that and trying to get it done.
Yeah.
Because she herself was down 2-5, I think, in that second set, and she came back, and that tiebreak was key because now Bencic had all the momentum, and then she was able to close it 6-4 in the third, and she's been really, really rock solid this year. I would say mentally. I think it's just a matter of Samsonova is a great win because I kind of put Samsonova, Sabalenka, Rybakina, they're all kind of in that same mold of power baseline type player of both wings that they can just Bencic, even though she's so great at redirecting pace and like you said, hugging the baseline and doing all the things that she's known for, like Hingis, sometimes just that raw firepower of both wings from Sabalenka or Rybakina can just be too much for her. But so her winning this match is huge in my opinion, even if it's just at a 500 level, because as we've seen, her success hasn't really translated in the majors quite as much as you would think, so far. Obviously, she has the 2 quarterfinals at the U.S. Open and a semifinal run in 2019, a fantastic semifinal against Bianca Andreescu. I have to go back on YouTube and watch the extended highlights of that again because that was some good stuff. And I just wonder, is it mental? Is it those things that you're talking about with strategically, tactically, what to do in those big points? Because all those things could result in, I think that's where Tursunov can really help him mentally because he's done the same with cultivate, and he seems to have like direct impact, like and his relationships don't seem to last more than a year or year or two, but he really gets a lot out of his players just right at the moment.
Yeah.
He's all business that way.
For me, if she's shown that she can beat a power player in a best of three match, she can do that at a slam. And Samsonova, Sabalenka, Rybakina. If Bencic can do it against Samsonova here, I don't see why she can't do it in a
Mhm.
slam, honestly. Unless there really is something mental. So for me, I think Bencic is ready to go deep in a slam at
Yep.
least, and really contest for it. So it's very exciting stuff, Vanch. Okay, final topic of today. In fact, well, in between, I'll summarize everything else that's happened. Elsewhere, we had Anastasia Popova smacking her way to the title in Linz. For me, not mega surprising. I think she can be red hot for a week and it might not be so red hot the next week.
Mhm.
So Sebastian Baez as well. Speaking of non-surprising, wins in Cordoba after never winning a hardcourt match for I think he won one of his last 18 hardcourt matches, right, and then goes on to win the title in Cordoba. Not the biggest surprise in the world. Carlos Alcaraz is contesting a final against Cam Norrie in Buenos Aires in his comeback. Again, not too surprising. And Taylor Fritz winning a title in Delray Beach. Not mega surprising. Swiatek, though, winning in Doha. Again, not mega surprising, but maybe the way she won it, technically only dropping 5 games en route to the title, the least games dropped ever in a title run. Yes, she got a walkover from Bencic in the quarters. And by the way, I would have been very interested to see how that would have panned out. I guess Swiatek would have been the favourite given the conditions, but we might have seen a few surprises. Who knows? Just very amazing for Swiatek to also get revenge against Pegula. But honestly, in windy, slow conditions, especially windy with all that spinning control, by the way, Swiatek was always going to be the favourite of this tournament, and she showed that emphatically this week.
Yeah, I just think her footwork and her ability to position herself, particularly on her forehand, but also just her balance is so good. And we know about her flexibility on things, shots like the open stance backhand, or when she's pushed deep behind the baseline. She has such good control on her ground strokes. And I think when it's windy like
Mm.
this and the conditions are slower, obviously, you can trace it even back to last year. She beats Kontaveit in that final, 2-0. She beats Sakari, she beats Sabalenka. It almost doesn't matter what you do in these conditions to her. She just looks completely unflummoxed because, that
Mm.
base is just so strong. And for Pegula, her one win came, or I guess, one win in the last 3 or 4 seasons, if we exclude out the 2019 win in Washington. It's come in ultra fast, speedy conditions like in Sydney when they played at the United Cup, and then you also had the element of Swiatek traveling and then playing for the country. It's a different dynamic. I didn't think Pegula actually played bad, like really not at all. Like there was no stopping her this week. There was absolutely no one that could have beaten her. I think in these conditions, she's by
Definitely.
far the favorite, even to not even lose a set, or even if you, I mean, 5 games. That's just ridiculous. What do you think about her defending all those points from last year? And there's a lot of talk, obviously, about the 37 match win streak. And
Just going on the last couple of months, if the conditions suit her, she's still the favourite. Her
yeah,
base is just too high for her to feel mentally sort of fragile there or anything. If it's elsewhere, maybe it could be fast enough that people take advantage of the serve. I think people will be looking to do that more and more. The
yeah,
the playbook against Fontic has changed over the last year, so I think she will be getting challenged more often in those sort of conditions. She won't win everything this year like she did last year, basically. But I see no reason why she doesn't win the tournaments where the conditions suit her. Like heavy favourite for the French, for example,
yeah.
obviously. So I don't see a mental anything getting in the way there for sure. The last topic, Vanch, Yibing Wu in Dallas. China comes to America. Very, very interesting matchup against Isner in that final. Honestly, it was such a good story. Just some of the background first. He's in the business of making history. Now becomes the first Chinese man to win an ATP title. At 17 years old, he was the first Chinese boy ever to win a major title at junior level. First Chinese man to win a match at a major at last year's US Open, and obviously only the second man to break into the top 100. So he's been on a roll. The level from the man, I guess, was pretty surprising. Yibing Wu is an exciting player. Just loads and loads to break down here. Obviously, the match itself was insane. You're playing John Isner, who's from Dallas, by the way, an actual homegrown boy there, and he's got this serve, obviously, that's never going to be flappable under pressure, and he showed that in the tiebreak. It went
I,
22
I love the word
points
that
on
you used
serve.
there, flappable, because actually that's what Isner said after the post match. He described Wu and he says the dude is just inflappable. Those were his exact words. And What a perfect way to describe him, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got nerves of steel, and he showed that in the tiebreak. Yibing Wu himself, he obviously had to hold 11 consecutive points on serve to keep that from going Isner's way, and he stepped up. He did not miss a single shot in that tiebreak, I think, up to like 12-11 or
Yeah.
something like that. It was insane. The man is a metronome. Reminds me a lot of Hyun Chung, of course. I think in a lot of ways, I suppose, also Asian as well, but in terms of just like the power as well. It's not like he's given sort of weak shots from the back of the court or anything, but it's just metronomic over and over again. Became very dramatic and exciting. Isner fluffs a match point, by the way, in the third set.
Yeah.
I think there was 4 championship points on his racket, but one was actually on his racket. I think he came to the net and fluffed the volley, showing that now. But all credit to Wu, of course. I mean, that point aside, he absolutely fair and square won that match. He won that tournament. He beat Fritz, he beat Shapovalov, and those players earlier on in the week. He was facing experience and the home crowd and a crazy serve indoors, and he came out on top, winning the title. I mean, where's the limit for this guy? It's such a good story, by the way. I'll give you a bit of the background. Fans, you might have heard it, but maybe not for those at home. In 2019, he went off the tour with loads of injuries. I think wrist, shoulder, back. I'm pretty sure there was one other thing as well, elbow.
Yeah, the elbow was big. The elbow really, you saw him wearing that sleeve also in this week in Dallas. That's that's something that can flare up every now and then, and we hope that doesn't get in the way of his success.
He came back in 2022 after not playing for 3 years, and he said post coming back that apparently that was in his favour in a way, because he was just able to train really, really hard, get all of his shots as solid as they could be. Now his movement is, on par with these guys, Djokovic and stuff. He's so balanced in every shot. He just looks so athletic, like one of the most modern players I've seen ever, I guess, bar the serve in a lot of ways. But just, it reminds me of Alcaraz in a lot of ways, and how solid he can be with aggression and, well, I think more the mental aspect, just the fact he's got nerves of steel like Alcaraz is the main thing that reminds me of him, I guess. It's such a great story. I mean, he's starting this sort of Chinese wave, with him, Zhang as well, first Chinese man to break into the top 100, by the way. Jun Chen Shang as well, number 165. We saw him defeat Oscar Roth at the Australian Open. Apparently, he's dubbed the two of them Big Jerry and Little Jerry. I don't know if you saw that, Vanch.
Yeah.
Very cute. Amazing story. What did you think of it?
I'm so happy for Chinese tennis and men's Chinese tennis to finally be on the map, because we've had Lina, we're seeing it now with Chin Wen and a lot of players like that. But this guy, he has a good sense of humor. He has a good head on his shoulder, a really calm demeanor as well, and I love his ability to inject pace off of both wings, and just on the sudden he seems pretty fast, athletic, quick to me. He's got really, really nice hands. I love his return of serve. I think that's one of his best assets. Even though you're playing John Isner, in some of the big points, he was able to get some deep returns back and really force John into a lot of mistakes. His rise is amazing, because 2017 U.S. Open, he wins the juniors in both singles and doubles, and then he has all these expectations, pressure, and everything around him, and then he comes back and he's recovering from those injuries, and then guess what? COVID happens, and so now he's stuck in China and he can't travel and he can't play anything internationally, and he's just stuck to playing local events pretty much. And then his rise, I think, like last year he was outside the top 1100, and now inconceivably I think he's even underranked at 58. There's no way he'll be 58. I think by the end of the year, I expect to see this guy in the top 20. I feel that confident about his game. Now we still need to wait and see outdoor conditions, clay, grass, how does he and can he stay healthy, which is the main thing. But I think if he stays healthy, why not? To me, he reminds me kind of a little bit like Kei Nishikori, but just a lot more imposing, and just that athleticism really, really shines through. And I think he can protect his serve even a little bit better than Kei did. But now, just can he have that week to week consistency? I like Wu Yibing a lot.
So do I. Yeah, I really like him. It's very, very exciting. Yeah, go watch the highlights first if you've not seen them.
Yeah.
And take note, Yibing Wu is here. I'm going to close up shop there, I think, Vansh. Thank you very much for coming on, as always. I'm very excited to have you on again at some point in the near future. Go check out Vansh at VanshV2 please, on Twitter. Give him a follow. Give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. We'll catch you very soon on the Online Tennis Podcast. Cheers, Vansh.
Cheers. Yep. Thank you for having me, and love the enthusiasm you bring to the game, Jack, and happy to share it with you. So,
Thanks very much,
yeah.
Vansh. See you soon.